Okay, so the month of May is upon us. This is probably my favorite month of the season to go bass fishing because they're starting to slide out, that is. So there's a lot of different things we can talk about this month, but there's number one thing is it's probably one of the better topwater months of the season. Really a great topwater month. And whether you're up north, obviously, again, I always think of like there's a few people within, if you're in Florida and if you're in the upper reaches of the Northeast and in Minnesota and some of those places, you're going to be, especially the northern folks, are going to be about a month behind on these videos. May might be your June, so on and so forth. You know, in Florida is normally a month ahead, and it's a very unique scenario. So I try to bring some things into these videos to give you guys a little bit of understanding of what actually is going down and try to hit the majority of the country. A lot of us folks are on the same, I would say, from, again, you know, around that upper northern part of Indiana to about down here into even Georgia and across the country. We're fairly similar when you look at the middle of the central United States or even out at the West Coast. A lot of the times the fish will spawn similar times, which is cool because it makes a lot of these videos applicable for a lot of people that are going out there trying to go bass fishing and figure out what baits they need to throw on their lakes, their ponds, their rivers, all that good stuff in the month of May. So that's why I shoot these videos, and that's what I enjoy. I enjoy talking about bass fishing and fishing in general, and hopefully teaching you all that are following along a little bit about how to catch one. Before we jump into the lure side of things, I do want to do a quick deal. Drop a comment below if you've watched these videos, so on and so forth. I'm going to give away, I'm just going to pick one random comment. I'm going to give away, this is the brand new Realtree 2.0 Storm. It's actually a Magellan Outdoors gator hoodie, and this is something that I designed. It's more of a sun shirt with actually a built-in gator and a quarter zip. Awesome piece of equipment. It just came out, signature series item for me. So if you guys, I'll drop a comment, I'll drop a link below in the description below for you guys to check it out. But one special lucky commenter down there will obviously get, I'm going to send one of these to y'all. So just appreciate everybody who follows along and watches these videos religiously, because I enjoy talking bass fishing. If you've ever met me before, you probably realize that at a show or, you know, on the water, I'm a little bit more running all over the place. But, you know, if I'm just chilling, I'm talking about bass fishing, that's for sure. So let's just jump into it. Look, it is my favorite time of month because they're done. They're almost done spawning, and some of them are getting done. This is the month, the transition month, that happens where a lot of the fish are getting done spawning, or just they're getting up there the first couple weeks of May. They might be spawning really heavy, but by the end of May, where are they going? To some offshore stuff or a little bit further out, right? I love this time of year because, number one, you can catch them so many different ways. There's not really one way that just is dominant, and that's why I have 8 rods set up right here. To my right, from shallow to deep, I will tell you this, to give you an understanding of what goes down in May. A lot of the country, the bass spawn really happens, I would say the majority of the bass spawn happens in April for the majority of the country. April is time to pick up your wacky worms, your methylated janitors. You know, you can throw a frog around a little bit, but it's time to slow down and pick things apart because they're spawning. That is April in a nutshell. You jump into May and you get those first spawners that were in early April, and they're ready to eat. They're done. They're done spawning. And those fish actually want to go feed up. And what happens right after the bass spawn? 2 things. One, the shad spawn. Shad spawn comes right after the bass spawn. Oh, we gotta check in. Hold on one second. Okay, so what I was saying was a lot of the bass get done spawning, they're hungry, and then what do they go? They go eat. And the number one forage that they focus on is shad for the majority of the country. Some places, of course, there's trout and there's perch and there's a lot of different things, but the majority of them, it's either shad or it's bluegill. So a lot of the baits I'm going to select are gonna be around that for the most part, but let's just start off with the number one lure for the month of May. And that is going to be a topwater bait, okay? To me, overall, I love throwing a topwater, and this is called it's more like a popping style bait. This is called a cover pop. To me, I like a walking popper. So walking poppers or popping style baits are a little bit different than like spitting popping style baits, right? And the reason behind that, this is a little bit bigger profile. So I'm roll casting this around and fishing it around like docks and backs of places. A lot of the fish, before they go back out offshore, they're actually either fry guarding or they're around a lot of those bluegill that are getting ready to spawn, and then some of the shad that are up there literally spawning as well. So they get their opportunity to focus on the forage aspect and really feed up before they even get out there. Some of them will go out there offshore already, but a topwater is one of the best ways to target those fish. And for me, like this one is probably one of the better ones out there, because you're basically, what I'm looking for is like undercut banks or steeper banks, little rocky banks, laydowns, around the backsides of boat docks, places where I feel like the fish are going to, like right before they leave, it takes them a little bit longer. I think a lot of times as anglers, like one issue that I've had over the period of like fishing is like, especially earlier on in my career, and I still can do this from time to time, is I want the fish to be somewhere they're not. Okay, they're spawning last week or 2 weeks ago. Man, they should be out on the main lake points or getting ready to be on some of those shallower points, but they're still in those pockets, right? Sometimes they're still in the pockets. It takes them time to transition out of certain places and ultimately to where they're gonna transition to deeper water or wherever that might be. Even though, like, hey, you might have caught them in an area 2 weeks ago and they were spawning, they might be still pretty close to that area. You just have to maybe just slide out just a few hundred yards or a different type of cover than maybe they were originally on, right? Or they might be on the exact same stuff. So this bait right here is a good one just because I like to throw it like on like a 40-pound braid. I like braid on top water, but the big key is giving a little bit of tip action, like a 7.0 medium heavy. That's a select rod, 40-pound Suffix 832 braid. This is like actually the Mega Jaws Cast King reel. So you guys have been, you know, I've been trying to, I've got Abus, I got Shimano's, I got some old Ducketts. I have a combination of everything. So I've been testing a lot of different reels and trying to play around with them. So it's just, you guys know I've been having some fun with it. So far, this reel's been pretty cool. I mean, pretty nice. I've only made a few casts with him and fished with him a little bit, but seems to be pretty solid. That being said, this bait is gonna be a good one. And so what I'm gonna focus on real quick here, I'm gonna show you guys some of the goods on a new lake. So one thing that we always do on Top Baits of the Month is select a lake. And this week, in this month's lake, is going to be Lake Guntersville. We just got down with Red Crest. Shout out to my boy Sizzle, bringing home the dub in April. But guess what? We're going to slide over to Guntersville and check it out. I got a screen recording. I'll show you guys exactly where I'm going to focus on throwing that cover pop and what I'm going to focus on. Now, the problem with the Guntersville is there's a lot of floating eelgrass, but we're going to just act like there's not as much floating eelgrass in the lake, because you might have to transition. If you're fishing Guntersville, you might have to transition, if there's too much floating eelgrass, to a popping frog as well. Same sort of thing, but I like a treble hook bait if I can. Like, just because overall, if I'm throwing that bait around, I feel like, you know, if they slap at it, I have a better chance to hook them than I will a frog. If you have a lot of grass in your lake and a lot of floating eelgrass like Guntersville, you can also work with like a popping frog style bait. So let's dive into exactly what I'm going to be looking at and some of the places that I would sort of like generally recommend, like what I would be focusing on. So let's just sort of like mid lake. Here's like Short Creek, some of the stuff right here. This is actually the sea maps that's actually inside of the graph. It's already pre-uploaded. Really nice mapping. We'll just sort of slide inside this pocket. Here's the main river right here. You can sort of see the main river right here. This is the main river, the main river channel. This is a secondary channel. This pocket right here is a little steeper. This is the kind of stuff that I would definitely focus a lot of my time on, is some of these little pockets like this, little steeper, places that I'm not going to throw this bait on a lot of flatter areas because I'm walking this bait. And so what I'm doing is I'm casting it next to those logs and go pop, pop, pop. And this bait is just got those bigger hooks on it, and it really allows that bait to walk in place a lot better. So steeper banks overall are typically better for this technique. Big and flat or like places, like specific pieces of cover. That's why it's called a cover pop. Like you're really precisely placing this. Like, and I can work it fast, like down a bank, but I really like to roll cast this bait around in like really short little roll pitches and casts to like getting around those boat docks and around those laydowns and around those rocky banks. And I feel like that works the best for me. Those pockets, these places that are little steeper banks is really where I'm gonna recommend you spending some of the time throwing that type of stuff. Now, you can go in these shallower pockets, like this one right here is a little flatter towards the back, but I like to sort of, like, it's basically, imagine if they're spawning back in here or on these points or something like that. A lot of times they'll push their fry or they'll start to transition back out on some of those steeper banks where that's when they're going to feed back up. Before they get out here, out deeper, they won't be far, they'll be just boom, just a little bit further out than obviously where they were maybe a week prior, right? So that's sort of my focus a lot of times on those little bit steeper banks with that topwater. So next thing that we do have to talk about is the shad spawn. That was sort of talked about a little bit, but sort of techniques for the shad spawn. Typically on a lake like Guntersville, that has a lot of grass, there'll be shad that'll spawn out in the grass, and they'll spawn on points, they'll spawn in the grass, they even spawn around a little bit of the boat docks, but definitely more of the grass flats type of stuff. So let's just say, for instance, okay, so here's a nice little flat point. It's in the mouth of a spawning pocket right here. That would be a perfect scenario of like something that I'm gonna look for a shad spawn, specifically on Guntersville. And what bait am I gonna be throwing for that would be more along the side of a jerkbait or maybe a swim jig. This is like a jerkbait. I think a jerkbait's one of the most underrated post-spawn baits there is, just because I feel like you can make that bait, it's so much more erratic, obviously, like than a lot of other baits out there, and you can really work it fast. Typically around the shad spawn, and this time of year when the water warms up, that water temperature for the shad spawn to start happening is like 70 degrees, and it only typically happens the first hour or two of the morning. So if you hit snooze, you will probably lose out and miss out on some of the best bass fishing. This is the one time of year, listen, I like to hit snooze a lot too. Listen, don't get me wrong. I'll hit that snooze button plenty of times. There's certain times a year that you couldn't get me to hit a snooze button. And that is right now. Like this month, I'd be up every morning getting ready to throw it, like for the first, literally if it's cracking daylight, I'm on the water. I'm on the water 30 minutes before sunup, just getting ready to, because they go crazy for an hour. It is if you've never experienced a shad spawn bite, it is literally the coolest thing that I feel like it happens in bass fishing. And why in bass fishing, because I think why it's so cool is it only happens for a short period of time, of course, and they don't ask a whole lot of questions. So when they're on an actual shad spawn bite and they're actually on the shad, they're feeding like crazy, and they bite it so hard that they're not looking at your bait, you're just working it and just locking up. Like I've never had more aggressive bites than a post-spawn bass that's targeting a shad spawn. Like they're vicious. It's really something. You have to experience it. I know a lot of you all won't. Maybe you don't have a whole bunch of shad in your lake, or if you're fishing a pond or a river, you might not get to experience it. But trust me, if you ever can, go for 10 days straight. If you can find one place, it'll probably be the most fun you've ever had bass fishing if you do find it, because it is seriously so cool. It really, really is. And a jerkbait like this one right here, like that Maverick, that shallow diving jerkbait is something that I highly recommend, because I think that whether it's down rocky riprap banks, the shadow spawn, they'll spawn on grass, like eelgrass or hydrilla, and they'll spawn on gravel. They'll spawn on a lot of different things, but the big thing is just because you see the shad flickering doesn't mean you're gonna find bass on them, right? There's bank shad spawns that are all on the bank, and you'll see them, like typically when you get to the boat ramp in the morning, if it's like a warm morning, they'll be like flickering on the bank, and you'll know like it's happening. Like that's happening. And they'll follow your bait a lot. You'll catch shad in the morning because they're trying to spawn with your bait because they bump each other. So I'm getting into super detailed stuff like early on in this video, but that is, you can tell I love, I enjoy the heck out of it. A jerkbait is definitely one that I would recommend. That Maverick right there, matte shad, if the water's a little more stained, more of like, more of your more opaque colored whites and stuff like that is what I would recommend for the shad spawn or for that early morning bite. But that please, if you've ever, just try it. You've got to try it. So let me talk real quick here. Again, sort of jump into the Lowrance unit. You can see right here on the mouth of this creek, perfect scenario. You got a point right here. It's on the main channel. It's not the main river. It's a secondary channel. So a lot of those fish are moving out of this pocket and sort of spawning around this area, or maybe even in this creek. they'll be on this point right here, or maybe a point like that, or a point like that. It's a great opportunity to get on those fish that are first coming out. Okay, this is the thing. As the year goes on and the month of May goes on, the bass spawn sort of is the exact same thing as like what the shad do. Okay, so the bass typically start in the backs of the creeks and spawn in the backs of the creek first. And then as it warms up throughout the whole lake, the bass will start to spawn in the main lake and so on and so forth. They'll move their way out. So there's waves of bass. Same thing happens on the shad spawn. The first shad spawn will happen inside of a creek. And then as it warms up where the main rivers hits that 70-degree mark, a lot of those shad will start to spawn on the main channel. So if you get on the main channel and you don't see shad spawning and you're like, this is not happening, and it's super early in the morning and it's warm, there's a good chance you could go to like that next creek or, you know, a pocket or a creek, and they might still be in those places. So just giving you an understanding of that. So focusing steeper banks, even like this right here, inside this creek, a steeper bank like that, if there's laydowns, anything like grassland, those fish will set up on that. And as these fish start to transition out of some of these areas, in some of these spawning habitat areas, they start to transition out, and they might set up on something like that before they head out to the main river. We try to force them to get out offshore and do these things, but they don't do it. It takes them time to get there. So that's more of like a rundown of how the shad spawn works. And I must say I'm all over the place, but I will say that you can tell that I'm passionate about it, and it is one of my favorite times of the year to fish. If you can't tell that, then you can just click off the video, because I'm just telling you, that's facts. You can just know. Okay, sort of the last thing that you have to sort of have for a shad spawn would be a swim jig. And we don't really have to go into detail like crazy. Like this should be like more swimming around laydown, swimming around grassy, like there's little grass mats. Sometimes there's green, like shrubby grass mats on Guntersville and stuff like that. You can get in the backs of those creeks and swim a jig in the morning. The shad will be spawning. Doosh. Be eating that. Ooh, popping frog's really good too. I do have fluorocarbon on this right here. I would recommend throwing braid if you're in that heavier cover situation. But if you're around boat docks, steeper like seawalls, stuff like that, if your lake doesn't have a lot of grass in it, they're gonna spawn a little harder cover. So riprap banks, seawalls, boat docks, stuff like that, they'll spawn on, even bluff banks, stuff like that. So, but a swim jig in general, I'm throwing like I think it's a 1/4, 3/8. I typically will throw a 3/8 a little bit more, but this is like a 1/4. This is more of a swim jig for swimming around cover. There's times when I'm swimming a little deeper around seawalls and stuff where I'll throw a 1/2 because I want to have more weight to pitch it around or so. And then like more of a translucent, this is like a cleanup crawl, just in like a more of a translucent pearl color. So that's what I recommend, pitching around 7.3 heavy, 17-pound fluorocarbon or 40-pound braid if you're around heavy cover. That's what seems to work for me really well. Can't go wrong with that. In a lot of those areas, if you aren't around a lot of that, the grass like Guntersville has, the swim jig and a spinner bait would be my 2 recommendations to try to use that first couple hours if you just want something you can cast and wind and you're trying to reel around trees, because the jerkbait's probably not going to be your best bait. Like fishing around trees, you're going to get hung up a little bit more, a little bit harder to cast. So trees and some of those cover situations like that, spinner bait, swim jig, highly recommend it. So this bait right here is, if you guys have watched any of my videos and you watch Harris Shane, caught some really big fish on a Bronco bug this season. Shouting out to all my buddies in this video, like DC, shouting on his win. Shouting out my boy Kyle Welcher on his win at the Pasquotank River, Bassmaster Elite Series. Super proud of him for that. But he won on this bait right here. And it's a bad dude around the spawn and post spawn. Really imitates a crawfish well, but also imitates a bluegill really well. I talked about this last video. Talked about that in the month of April. Definitely still highly recommend a Bronco bug that works really well. But the one I'm going to switch over for, okay, now, switching it up on y'all. If I want to switch it over a little bit, is the hedgehog. This one right here is the hedgehog. If they're still around that spawny kind of time of year, you feel like the fish are definitely still up there in that spawn mode, what I highly recommend, if you're trying to get numbers of bites, hedgehog. If you're looking for the biggest ones in your lake, Bronco bug. The thing is, the more streamlined a plastic bait is, typically you'll get more bites from a lot more fish. The wider he is and more bigger profile he is, the less bites you might get, but you'll be catching the big ones. So that's how, when I'm trying to catch a big one, I'm always flipping him. Now, I'll catch the little ones on him too, don't get me wrong. He catches them just period in his story, but there's sometimes profiles make a difference. Certain days, you could throw either one and catch them, right? But to me, there's times around that spawn and into that post spawn that more of this streamline profile, like lizard, creature bait profile, can generate just more bites out there on the water. I recommend throwing a 1/4 ounce weight if I'm Texas rigging this guy right here, and then I'll just rig him on a 3 or 4/0 straight shank hook, and that guy right there is what you got. Now that's actually a 3/8, but I do recommend a 1/4 most of the time when I'm flipping this bait around, just because I feel like, and even on a Bronco bug, I still recommend a 1/4 if they're spawning. So if you're pitching around light spots, if you're pitching around shallow water cover, wood and docks, stuff like that, those fish are spawning on, 1/4 ounce to me, you just get more bites around the spawn. If the fish start to transition more to the post spawn, that's when a faster rate of fall tends to generate more bites. So if you feel like the majority, you go in those pockets, you go in places, and you feel like the majority of the bass are post spawn, then I'll transition back to a 3/8 ounce weight, even a half, because it's a reaction thing. So they react, they bite it, where like something about a lighter weight around the spawn generates more bites. Just gives them more time to react to it because they're normally guarding. So it gives them more time to react to it. Boom, they grab it, and they tend to spit it out a lot more. They nip a lot more during the spawn. So they grab that bait. There's a lot less weight there, so they hold on to it a little bit better, and that's why I really prefer a lighter weight during the spawn, and then transition in the post spawn when that happens. So that's what my recommendation is for sure. Sort of what I'm going to focus on. This is actually a 7.6 heavy, 17 pounds Suffix advanced fluorocarbon, 8-to-1 gear ratio. Parada is what I have right here. That's the setup right there. But where am I going to fish with this? Couple different things. Where I would focus my time. So down rocky banks will work. So let's just go to Big Spring Creek. Spring Creek, right in here. They have steeper banks down through Spring Creek, a lot less flats. So like maybe just down the banks. Some of these banks, even some of these bridges, I'll pitch down through there, hop it around. Now you will lose some weights, you'll lose some baits, but that'll work. Definitely down dock stretches on the back sides of docks. They'll start to transition into around those dock poles and stuff, because they'll spawn around in between the docks, but then they'll start transitioning to the docks themselves around that post spawn time frame. So boat dock, stuff like that are going to be a major player. And then in the transition stuff like this right here, that would probably be a pretty good little stretch to flip around. So that's what I would like. Laydowns also are just like probably the best. If there are not docks on your lake, laydowns are the #1 piece of cover that I would recommend to focus your time when I'm pitching and flipping. That's this time of year, it's like isolated laydowns, like it's a perfect transition piece of cover the fish will set up on, and then they'll go from there and transition out offshore, wherever they're gonna go for their summertime. You know, they'll move their transition. So it's a great transitional piece of cover, typically in the mouths of pockets or in a secondary where those fish would feel like, or the mouths of these creeks, more main body of the creek, is what I would recommend. So just easy, simple, but so we're gonna dive into something that I absolutely love. This is offshore bass fishing, and where are they gonna be first thing. So that being said, I'll pick up a lure that I feel like is one of the best for targeting bass when they first get out offshore. This is one of my old 7.6 cranking rods. And this bait right here is a DT16. Now, depending on the depth of the fish where they're set up, a DT10 would be a great bait. A DT16 is a good all-around profile and size of a crankbait that I want for like first thing going out there on the water, especially this time of year. Those fish just tend to set up on a lot of these places, and when they first get out there, they're typically a little bit more apt to bite. They're hungry, sort of like you got to feed them. And what am I going to feed them? This crankbait right here. Like, and the thing is about a deep diving crankbait is when you do find those fish, it is like it's so cool. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll cast out there when I find them, and I'll find them with my electronics, but you can also crank a lot of these places. You can crank a lot of these places that are just more transitional places, like points and stuff like that don't have a lot of grass or stuff on them. I'll throw that crankbait out there and fish around, because speed triggers bites this time of year. You don't have to have like a deep cranking rod either to crank. I mean, I have that 7.6 from my old series that I still use. It's more of a medium heavy cranking rod. That's what I still use personally. You don't have to really have like a deep diving crankbait rod. At 7.3, I do recommend a little bit longer, probably like a 7.3 if you're gonna at least try it out. And if you really like it, then you need to step into probably a 7.6 and bigger, because what that allows for you to do is make that cast and get a further further cast out there, which in turn gets your bait deeper and stays on the bottom longer. Okay, so what that allows you to do is be more efficient and have more casts that are hitting the bottom, and you're hitting that bottom, and like that's when you get your bites. Like, you're not getting your bites typically cranking, especially post spawn, even really most any time of year. I'm gonna say 90% of my bites when I'm throwing a crankbait or when the bait's hitting the bottom, deflecting off the bottom, and speed is your trigger. So speed and deflecting off of things like wood and rock and bottom is how that triggers those fish into actually biting. So that's why I really am big on a little bit longer rod, because you get that bait down there to depth faster, which in turn generates the bite more, like we're more efficient. It's all about efficiency. Where are they gonna show up at? So the first fish that I feel like are probably gonna show up are gonna be places like, here's the very back of a creek, right? Major, big, giant creek right here. First place I would recommend checking would be like a roadbed like that guy right there. That is like textbook. Let me tell you, textbook when you're talking about a place where these fish would ultimately come out, get it done spawning, come out from this bridge, and all of a sudden there's a roadbed out here that gets them a little bit more depth of water. They could set up on one of these ends or up on right there, and now they're right where they need to be. They might not be out there on the main river yet. They might not. Now look how far the main river is. Boom, main river's way out here. See that? Way out there. But right here is a perfect transition place inside of a creek that those fish could set up first thing, and that could be happening right now. Now, as the month of May goes on, that's when you start to transition more to out here on the main river channel. Okay, so you see places like this and big ditches and stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that I'm gonna be looking for, where those fish, this is what you would call the main river channel right here. This is the main river right there. That's the main river. That is exactly what when you hear main river channel on the TBA, that is what we're talking about. Big crankbaits casting out there, and see how it gets like, might be 15 foot up on top right there. They could be right there. They could be anywhere. That's the tough thing about it this time of year. You don't know where they're going to set up at first, but it will happen at some point in time in the month of May. They will be out there. And when they are out there, I'll be ready for y'all, because I love it. Dude, I love it. It's the best thing when you idle over something. And I know this is probably like when you idle over with your electronics, and I'm talking about side imaging and down imaging, and you see them like dinged up. I don't even have to cast. I just got to know I'm like, I'm just so happy you guys decided to show up. What's up, guys? Listen, you guys, I love shad spawner, and I love cranking a big plug out deep. I do. And I love a topwater bite. I'm shallow. That's why I love May. That is literally why I love May bass fishing, because it has everything that I love about bass fishing in 1 month. If there's 1 month I could say, we're stopping all the tournaments and I'm going fishing every day just for fun, it would be the month of May. Hands down, no questions asked. That is when I'm going bass fishing every single day. Ask my wife. I'm taking Hudson out there on the water, and we're about to reel some in. I don't know how we're going to reel them in, but we're going to rig up with a lot of these rods that I have right now, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to reel them in. So that gives you a better representation of exactly what I'm looking for, and at least hopefully that gives you an idea. Now, obviously, not every lake is a TBA, so hopefully you can understand sort of like what that is sort of like, just sort of like what to look for, a little bit of like what you might be looking for on your body of water and what they might be going. Because like even like guys in Indiana, shout out to my boys and girls from Indianapolis, Indiana, and Hoosier State. It's where I grew up. But I mean, I remember going out there and catching them like the last week of May on Geist. Like that place was a dummy. Like you could catch them out there cranking and just, ooh, it's good. It's good. That being said, I'm gonna talk to you guys about a couple other baits that I would recommend fishing out there offshore. Now that I've talked a little bit about that. Of course, you cannot go wrong with a freeloader spinning rod. This one's obviously, it just gets a lot of bites. A freeloader, this is the original 4 1/4 size. Typically 1/4 ounce to 5/16 is what I recommend offshore. If you're shallower offshore, 1/8, but just throwing that bait out there, letting it hit the bottom, start working it back. And contrary to popular belief, you do not have to have forward fishing sonar to catch bass on a freeloader. You just cast it out there. You do have to find the fish, but you don't have to have forward fishing sonar. Cast out there at the bottom, start shaking that thing, and all of a sudden it goes tick, zippy. That's exactly what you're looking for. And I really focus more on like, Even if you're in the back of the boat, you cast it out there, you let it hit the bottom, shake, 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 throwing slack back at that rod or back at that bait. And what that's doing is that's allowing that bait to rock. And that's when the fish come up there and bite it. So anyway, that's what I mean, definitely a freeloader on a lot of those places. When you find that offshore school, that's a good one right there. And then of course, last but not least would be a hair jig, okay? Same thing out there offshore, hair jig. There's a lot of different hair jigs out there, but yeah, this guy right here is a nice fluffy one. He's got a little mylar in him. He's got a couple like feathers. I might go turkey hunting too. That's another thing I love about dang May. Turkeys, gobble gobble. It's not Thanksgiving, but hey, hair jig. Might have to make a turkey feathered hair jig here in a bit. I don't know. So that is like my rundown of definitely the offshore side of things. So if you're not planning on going offshore, you're focusing more on the bank side of things, it's okay. Don't worry about it. I got some other things for you. If you are absolutely lost, if you are lost in the month of May and you're like, I have no clue what I'm going to do. I'm literally lost. Cover water. And one thing that I do like to cover water with, a buzzbait. Again, topwater, this is a great topwater month. Typically when they get done spawning, they'll bite a topwater. They're all about an aggressive presentation. So you don't have to throw black. I mean, I like black certain days. I like a white toad. This is that accent buzzbait with just a toad on the back, black. I'll either throw white with a nickel blade, or I'll throw black with a black blade. Doesn't have to be anything in particular, but a 7.0 medium heavy, and I'm really just covering water with this. Biggest thing is that squeal. In covering water allows for me to fish flats, be able to fish in the backs of pockets, be able to cover banks. And there's certain tournaments that I just, when I've got in trouble, I could pick up a buzzbait this time of year specifically, and figure out what types of banks the bass are setting up on, right? So even if I had to slow down later, I can pick up a buzzbait, cover water, boom, I get a bite on a rocky bank, boom, I get another bite on a rocky bank. All of a sudden, I pick up, a Bronco bug, and I start flipping down some of those banks as the sun gets up, and I catch a lot of the same bass. So it's really a good indicator to figure out where the fish are at and what they're doing. So buzzbait is definitely not one that you can leave home without. Just covering water, figuring out where the fish are going to be at is a big part of that. And I mean, I really recommend like 40 or 50 pound braid. I think it's 50 pound 832 is what that is right there. But 40 is probably my favorite all around topwater braid. 40 is definitely my all-around topwater braid. Last but not least, sorry guys, I've been rambling on, having some fun, because you guys can tell like I'm excited to go bass fishing because I've not actually fished that much in April. I hung out with the family. Happy Easter to everyone that got the opportunity to spend time with their families out there and actually I got a little bit of time to spend some time with my little boy on the water. So had some fun and hung out by the pool a little bit, but did not do a whole bunch of fishing. So you can tell I'm a little bit more like, let's go. We got a tournament on Chickamauga starting, practice starts tomorrow, Monday. Oh, I hope they're biting. So you guys will see that, it'll happen pretty soon here. Hopefully they're biting, that's all I'm gonna say. Don't drop any comments and say anything about what they're doing because we can't get any information, just a heads up. Okay, last but not least, if you are completely lost after everything that I just told you, and you have no idea what to do, none of this works, just pick up a shaky head. Pick up a shaky head. This right here is a janitor with a 3/16 ounce shaky head, whatever you like. I think this is actually I think Shin made this one actually. Just don't make it super difficult. Pick up a shaky head, 10-pound leader line, 8-pound Suffix revolve, green pumpkin if the water's a little stained to clean, baby bass if the water's really clean, black if the water's dirty. Drag it around, fish rocky transitional banks, flatter points, drag around and get bites. Because the one thing that as the water warms up, the numbers of bites should tick up. You should be able to get more bites just fishing around. The bass will get riled up, they'll start to acting right, and that is something that I do recommend. So if you can't even catch them, probably a wacky worm as well. I can't say you can't go with a wacky worm, but last month we talked about a wacky worm. You can do that shallower. A drop shot's another one we didn't talk about. A Nico's another one we didn't talk about. There's plenty of things you can throw finesse tactics will play for this month. So if you're really struggling and you just need to get bites, you want to go out there and have a good time with your kids or your family or your buddy, pick up more of some of your finesse tactics, Ned rigs, drop shots, wacky worms, you know, Nico, shaky heads, and you'll get bites. Harder to generate the biggest bites because the big fish are typically looking for a big meal, but you can generate. I'm not saying you can't catch a 6-pounder. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all, because actually yesterday I caught a 6-pounder on a pig stick. So not saying you can't, but typically this time of year, the bigger ones want a bigger meal. So that's all I'm saying. Shaky head, throw it everywhere. Buzzbait, throw it everywhere. Figure it out and have fun, for God's sakes. Please go out there, go bass fishing, go fishing in general. Take your kids fishing. This is when the bluegills are starting to spawn. This is when the bass are actually biting. It's finally here. The month that they're all get away from the bank. Thank God. Have fun, and we will see you guys on the next one.